Hello and welcome to De-Risking Healthcare. Our episode today is about organizational risk assessment and recommendations from Leigh Ann Yates, the Queen of Risk, about how to communicate their importance, how to get them started, resources you can use to make them better, and a discussion of challenges you may encounter on this difficult but important type of work. First, let me say our sponsor, SafeQual, has all sorts of software to help you pursue excellence. They really know what they're doing and have reinvented what software should do to make you and your healthcare system more productive at improvement, risk management, safety, quality, and compliance. They also believe in supporting this channel, so go visit them at www.safequal.net. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Dan Corcoran. I'm also president of SafeQual and volunteer with ASHRM and HFMA. I'm here today with Leigh Ann Yates. She's a president and CEO of Risky Business Consulting and a senior healthcare consultant at Hallmark Financial Services. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Very few people in the New York survey of risk managers have indicated that they have done a recent risk assessment. What are the reasons they should prioritize this?
Well, I think there's probably a number of reasons why they have not done one. I mean, risk managers are so busy in their daily job, and to do a risk assessment takes a lot of time. You want to research and study your organization to really kind of get a good game plan going. I would encourage, though, those that have not, it's kind of like getting like your first lab draw. You set a baseline. How can you know where you were and where you want to go if you've never done one? This is what I usually tell everyone. If you're not prepared to do a full enterprise risk assessment, you should at least start small, start somewhere, take the first step, whether typically it's your high risk, high traffic areas, OB, ED, surgery, if you have any pain clinics, things like that, where you would think you would see a lot of, maybe errors come out of those service lines. So that being said, once you start, if you want to start small first, you need to make sure you have it as an end goal to do an enterprise risk assessment. For me, I'm a big thinker, so I want to understand the whole enterprise first, and then I want to drill down. And also, in defense of the risk managers, depending on how big your team is, you may have just only a couple people, or you might have, a whole group of people that could help you. So that's going to determine how quick you do them, how successful, and the time you allot to those risk assessments.
You felt strongly about the risk analysis process you described to me. What are the benefits of following that process?
Well, I think, evaluating risk, I think all of us that have practiced long enough in risk management, we become passionate about reducing patient harm and improving our processes. And those of us, that take pride in our work, we want to make sure things, run smoothly, are structured correctly. So being able to analyze risk and determine and look at your enterprise, what needs to be put into place, how it needs to be formulated, is absolutely critical. So the risk assessment process helps you kind of tweeze down into the weeds to figure out where things need to be fixed. Are they running good? Are they not running good? And where you need to focus your time. So I think it's absolutely critical to any organization.
How do you prove up the ROI for any resources you need to do this or do anything in risk management, such as the need for more staff or any other budget items?
The ROI is the biggest question probably I've had throughout my career, from like the chief financial officer, or, you might be, working with your actuaries and that sort of stuff, with a focus on your finance sector, which historically, I think risk managers have struggled to be able to tell the story of the ROI and make sure it's there and to prove it up, because we didn't have the technology. it kind of feels like at some points in history, we were like the stepchild of the organization. We never got dollars allotted to our budgets. So to be able to prove up the ROI, you've got to equate dollars with like your risk exposure. For instance, you might have a sponge case that was in litigation and settled for $150,000, or you might have a shoulder dystocia case that was litigated and settled for maybe 750,000 to $1 million. You can take those numbers and formulate them and place them in the storyline to be able to go back to your C-suite to talk about risk exposure equals financial exposure and money out the door, because that's where that gets their attention, is money going out the door. And it's all about losses equating to dollars being spent that maybe weren't planned for. So it's absolutely critical to your bottom line to be having these conversations with the CFO, the president, the COO, whoever that might be in your organization.
What are the organizational barriers to starting a risk assessment?
Well, one of the biggest barriers might be culture, because I've walked into several organizations that would say to me in the beginning, Leigh Ann, we need your services. We need you to do X, Y, and Z. And I go in there and it was like a ton of bricks, in front of me. So if you have a punitive culture, that's going to be an issue. If you have perhaps poor communication with your organization or your staff or your teams, where they do not know what the goal is, what the project or the focal point is, and you have not set the expectations, you could face failure and pushback in that space as well. So I think it's super important to communicate well, to make sure everyone understands why you're there, what your focal point is, what the end goal is, and how that's going to get tied back into, maybe it's going to change their daily, process within their scope and role at the organization.
How does culture affect the outcome of the analysis?
Well, I think, again, if you have a punitive culture, you may not get very far, because typically it takes, 5 to 7 years to change a culture. You can't just go in there and expect, in a couple months, it will change. You're talking about people and the way they've practiced for years. You're thinking about people that maybe have certain biases. And for instance, some of the leaders might think, well, it's been running fine. What I see a lot of is leadership that have been at an organization for many, many, many years. People are resistant to change, especially if it feels like it requires more work or a change or, this, that, and the other. Some of the less, the leaders that are less inclined to be open-minded might be a barrier.
How often do you hear from leadership that there is a good culture, but when you ask the frontline staff, you get a different answer?
Unfortunately, often, when I go into an organization, the leader, I usually have a big meeting with, the C-suite people, and then they'll tell me what they want. I'll go out and start talking to frontline staff and start doing my assessment. And then, if there's a good rapport, they will open up and start telling you things. Of course, I never divulged who told me what. I just tried to take the message as a whole back to the organization when I give my final feedback. You have to be mindful too, is it just a disgruntled employee, or is there really merit to what they're saying? And so that requires a little bit more digging and studying the organization to make sure the final feedback and the message that I give to my organizations, I want it to be accurate. I want it to have integrity. I want it to be a message in a way that they can take those nuggets and apply certain things to help improve, their operations and the patient safety in the end.
During the assessment, do you try to influence them on your beliefs about the importance of culture? Or do you wait until the end, not letting your beliefs, not trying to inspire them, for example, during the assessment?
If I can influence in a way that will improve patient safety in the workforce, then I will certainly do so. But it's never my personal viewpoints. It needs to be, science-based. It needs to be backed by some sort of data. And I'm very careful about that, because I I want to just present the information, and I want to ask the right questions to challenge. Do they know why they're doing it a certain way? If so, why? Let's talk about that. Is there a better way? So we usually go down that path of, if I'm going to try to bring something to their attention, I will ask more questions, and I will ask them to think about why they're doing it the way they're doing it.
How do you handle a risk assessment that shows difficult improvements must be made, such as somebody's boss needing to be replaced? How do you communicate that?
That's always, a two-edged sword and a little bit dicey in those conversations. Again, I think a good approach is to ask like very pointed questions. Specifically if you have like a leader that has been very toxic. One leader comes to my mind at one organization that I was at, and this leader had only been at the organization a short time and caused so much destruction on the employee side, the patient safety side. There were settlements going out because of this leader. So those questions asked back to the organization were very pointed as to what value does this leader bring to the table? Do you think this leader represents your mission, vision, and values of the organization? And so those conversations are had, and it really, I think, helps the local staff kind of think of things a little bit differently than they were before.
We touched on ROI already, but a question related to that. What to do when, your hospital system's just struggling to stay afloat? How do you justify an ROI in that situation to go forward with such a risk assessment or other efforts?
I think the reality of that is, depending on how much they're struggling is critical. You may not get to a full-blown risk assessment. That's why whether, the ROI might be, maybe you can get, think of things a little bit more creative and, get some college students in to help you if you need more staff, and kind of look at things from that lens. But for a lot of us, it has been a struggle at one time or another, and you just don't get the dollars allotted to your budget. So, you have to, but I go back to the core thing that I said before. If you can use the data analytics that you have and equate the cases and the loss exposures that you've identified to a dollar amount or a potential dollar amount or to a savings amount, then that will help you get the ROI that you need to move forward. Certainly you have to, when you look at how big the organization is, where the venue is, those sorts of things, all those things matter and go into the equation. So my answer is it could go many different directions. And sometimes you just won't get the funding, but if you keep at it and keep chipping away and, find other creative options for you. And that's where it's important to network with your colleagues, because we've all been through it. Maybe they have thought of something else that has worked well with them that could possibly work well for you. That is another avenue that could be explored.
You volunteer a lot of your time to ASHRM. And what I'd like you to do is take a moment to tell the audience about ASHRM, why you volunteer there, what resources they would have to make it easier to do one of these risk assessments in an impactful way.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I volunteer. It's my way to give back to my industry. And, I love ASHRM. Like, they're a wonderful resource, not only for me, but for other risk managers. And I think, they have the online forum, they have the exchange where you can get on and log on. And if you're a member and type in a question, it's a live question, and you have risk managers across the US that will respond back to you. They've, people like myself that are seasoned, participate in the content writing of some of their textbooks or their journal articles or the forum of the online writing. So it's very rewarding, because when I was a baby risk manager trying to, navigate through, a lot of stress, a lot of dysfunction at an organization in the beginning, it was difficult. And I don't feel like I had the resources back then that I do now. So one of my goals is to give back, to help others, to make it easier. ASHRM has, for instance, they have their risk management handbook, volume like 1, 2, and 3. And the ones I have are a little older, but they have updated those. You can probably get them online. And those are like the Bible that has helped, throughout the years with any knowledge gaps or information that that you might need. I also, when I was in California consulting, I have the California Consent Manual, which is a huge binder that has information that you can use it, across the board, certain things, and other things are California specific. So you have to be able to do your research and know the resources in your state. But ASHRM is absolutely a must. If you're not a member, you should become a member immediately, because you can network and do all of that. And so I think that for me, when you reach a certain point in your career, that is the next step. I feel obligated to give back to the new risk managers and to my colleagues and to the industry as a whole.
Hey, while we're on the subjects of books, you showed me a book earlier today that you want to recommend to our readers or listeners.
Yeah, I have like several good books. I'm like a book person. So one of the books that really helped me in the beginning was this one, Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. This particular book I liked because it talked about courage, having the courage to step forward, even if you're stepping into that arena alone, is really knowing why you're there, what you stand for, and having the courage, even if you fail. Failure is part of success, and that's what people don't realize is it's a part of success, because the biggest learnings I've ever had were in times when I had failed. And that's an opportunity to take those nuggets into a different scenario where you can be successful. So this book is wonderful, inspirational. The other book that I would like to mention is Thanks for the Feedback, because I think a lot of times we as risk managers face a lot of criticism, and sometimes it feels like a personal attack. But this book, Thanks for the Feedback, kind of helps you look at feedback a different way. So if we can depersonalize it and look at it in a way where we could take that feedback and use it in whatever scenario to maybe affect change. It could be a catalyst for a big change. So I think that's super important. One of the other books I like is Ownership Spirit, because for me, in our industry as risk managers, it's not an easy field, and burnout is real. And how do you keep going? Being able to have that ownership spirit to know, no, I own what I'm leading here, this team. We rise as a team, we fall as a team. And that's always been one of my mottos is, you're not there alone, we will get through it together. And the ownership spirit helps us own it, claim it, stand for it. The other book I have here is The Art of Apology. Apologetics for me has been very useful, especially when you're dealing with conflict. We're in conflict every single day of our lives as a risk manager, and stepping into heated patient care conferences. The art of apology and learning, how to communicate and how to apologize, in a way that is not admitting anything, but you're truly convey your empathy and sincerity to the other side of the table so they feel heard and they feel seen. The last one I just want to bring up is Lean In, because I think it's important to lean into conflict. If you're constantly pushing back and not leaning in, you're creating more angst for yourself. But once you learn to lean in, it becomes less scary and doable when you have those conflict conversations with families, physicians, staff, or other, members on your team. So I think all of these books, I keep them readily available, because at any particular time, I might refer back to one or the other, just either for a point of inspiration or for something I want to share with somebody that is on my team or a colleague that I think would help them.
Anything else you'd like our audience to take away from our conversation today?
Hang in there. You're not alone. We have all been through the battle of, the things that we have to go through in the field of risk management. And if you fall down, get right back up, dust yourself off. Failure is a part of success. Don't ever forget that, and don't ever feel bad about failure. If you had good intent and something didn't work out, it's all right. You can recreate it and keep pushing forward.
Well, thank you. Hey, thanks for listening. If you want more, be sure to click like or subscribe. If you'd like to appear on our program, be sure to fill out the SurveyMonkey below. Most important though, if you know someone who should hear this video, please forward it to them so that together we can all work to make healthcare just a little bit less risky.